This happened over the course of 3 or 4 years when I was a kid. I can't remember exactly when I got the first one, but I started having this recurring half-lucid nightmare maybe once every couple of months. From what I can remember, here's how it would go. I'd be lying down in bed. Only the view wasn't from my first-person perspective. Instead, I'd be looking down at myself from the ceiling like I was viewing my own bedroom through a security camera feed. The out-of-body dissociation always freaks me out. I try to float or swim towards my body, but I was never able to move beyond swiveling my head to look around the room. I was half-lucid, so I knew it was a dream, but that didn't make me any less scared. After calming myself down, I'd start noticing strange things about my bedroom. For one, the digital clock on my nightstand would always be counting in reverse. That was typically the first strange detail I'd notice. And once I noticed that, I'd start seeing other weird stuff. There were these drawings taped to random spots on the walls of dresser, like crown drawings you'd expect from a kid my age. But I had no memory of ever making them. I wasn't the type of kid who ever drew much, so it wasn't like I had just forgotten about them. They always showed the same thing. A row of people holding hands, all smiling with one smaller figure who I can only imagine, but I can't remember much more about the drawings than that. The other detail about the dreams that still sticks out to me is an old toy train of mine that was always, which I knew even at that age. But after that fourth dream, though, they just stopped. For a while at least, I went nearly 6 months without a single episode. And at some point, I let myself believe it was over. It all just kind of faded into the background. The way childhood fears tend to when life gets more normal. But then it came back. I have no idea what triggered it. But one random night, I had the dream again. Everything was exactly the same as I remembered: the clock, the drawings, the train, everything. But there was something different about that dream that was scaring me twice as much as the earlier ones had. I couldn't figure out what it was. Everything was following the exact same chain of events. But then as I was looking around the room, I realized what it was. My bedroom window was open. As soon as I saw that, I woke up. There was a period of maybe 5 minutes where I couldn't move. Complete and utter sleep paralysis. And it wasn't a passive sleep paralysis either. My brain was screaming at me to check the window the entire time, but I couldn't drag myself out of bed no matter how much I tried. On top of that, I felt significantly colder, as if cold air was blowing through my bedroom window, which I was convinced was wide open. Those 5 minutes were unlike any kind of fear I have ever experienced. All I could think about was how that man was moments away from climbing through my window. Yet there was nothing I could do about it. Another couple of months went by, but I wasn't going to be fooled again. Every night before I went to bed, I thought long and hard about the dream and attempt to brace myself for having it again. I'm not sure if this logic tracks, but I was hoping that keeping the dream on my brain would help me not get too scared. Should I have it again? To my surprise, that technique actually worked. The next time I had that dream, I wasn't even half as scared. I didn't even bother checking the window after waking up. By the time I had it again, I was barely scared at all. Still, something about it lingered. Not in a scary way, but enough to make me want to bring it up to my parents again. Maybe it was the way I explained it, or maybe it was because I was slightly older. But for whatever reason, they actually paid closer attention this time. I try to provide as much detail as possible, something I hadn't done before. As I was getting to my description of the man, my parents' demeanor shifted not too dramatically, but enough for me to notice specifically who was right as I was telling them about the cut on his forehead. There was a man named Brian who used to watch me sometimes. They always referred to him as Uncle Brian, but he wasn't actually family. Just a close friend of my dad's from college. I guess he was around a lot when I was a baby and a toddler, especially during the times when both my parents were working full-time. Even now, I still can recall a single memory with him in it. I had no choice but to move on with my life, though. Recurring dream or not. Another handful of months passed. I'm doing my best to describe the timeline as accurately as possible, but it's hard to remember exactly how much time passed in between each dream. That said, the frequency decreased after talking to my parents. I had the dream only once or maybe twice within the next year, but things took a very dark turn sometime in year 4. One night, after waking up from dream, I glanced over my window just out of habit, and this time I actually saw something move. It was just a flicker, but I was 100% sure something had just moved from right outside my window. And just like that, all the fear I'd spent years trying to prevent came rushing back. It was actually worse. I jumped out of bed and screamed for my parents, who took me very seriously. My dad sprinted outside in his bare feet, while my mom held me tightly. Eventually, my dad came back and started whispering stuff to my mom. They told me to stay put while they called the police. I listened to them and stayed in their room, although I don't remember ever hearing any sirens or other voices besides theirs that night. My dad insisted everything was fine and that the police were going to take care of things. The next day, he confessed to me that he had seen what he thought were extremely faint footprints underneath my bedroom window. I asked him if he thought it was Brian, and he said that was impossible since they had moved and Brian didn't know where we lived. My dad promised me that nothing bad was going to happen ever, and he would turn out to be right. I never had that dream again. I'm still yet to get a straight answer out of them, but I've since stopped trying. What I can't wrap my head around is the sickening thought that every time I had that dream, there really was someone outside my window watching me. Was it really plausible that someone had been periodically stalking me for 4 years? It doesn't track, and I can't decide what's scarier. If it really was Brian watching me, or just some complete stranger that my brain associated with him for whatever reason, and who knows how that somehow got translated into my dreams. I've done research, and I still don't even know how that would be possible. Maybe he was making a noise or something, and my brain picked up on it. I really can't say. What I can say is that I'm 95% sure. My parents never called the police that night. That's something I will likely never get an explanation for. I'll most likely never get any answers regarding this experience since it happened so long ago. But if I do, I'll send an update. I'm going to keep this as short as possible. Most nights, I fall asleep to some form of sound. That's the best way I know how to knock out quickly. Sometimes it's a chess video. Sometimes it's a podcast about space. Sometimes it's just a recording of a thunderstorm. You get the idea. I'm a very active dreamer, so whatever I fall asleep to usually gets translated directly into my dreams in some form. It kind of felt like I was in a movie or something. Then the boat lurched. I couldn't see what we had, but I definitely felt it. Whatever it was, it knocks the whole cell sideways and cracks something underneath. Water started gushing in through the bottom, and I remember trying to plug the hole with my jacket, which obviously wasn't doing anything. I started panicking, like full-on helpless panic. And just as the boat started to sink, a dolphin jumped out of the water, locked eyes with me, and said in perfect English, "Wake up." That instantly snapped me awake. I'm usually pretty groggy after waking up, but this was different, although I didn't know why yet. I looked around the room trying to figure out if anything was different or strange, but everything looked normal. My friends were sleeping next to me, and the living room was exactly how we left it. You know, that weird in-between phase. Right after you wake up, where you can't really process information accurately? That's what I was experiencing. A few seconds later, though, my brain started functioning properly, and I picked up on a sound that was definitely out of place. There was this distinct rushing sound coming from somewhere upstairs. It wasn't muffled like you'd expect if a faucet was just dripping. It was consistent, like a hose or something. That must have been why I had that wonky dream about the ocean. I sat there for a second trying to figure out what I was hearing. Then, like an idiot, I got up to check it out myself. The water was just gushing out. Full blast. There was no way that could have happened on its own. It didn't even make sense. I got close to the doorway and was about to step in, but something made me stop. Bathroom up there is pretty big. It's got this long counter and a bathtub with a curtain. Plus this awkward corner where the toilet is plenty of blind spots. For all I knew, someone could have been crouching behind the tub or standing right behind the door. My stomach dropped. I don't know why, but I just couldn't go in. I backed up and booked it down the stairs to wake up Duncan. I shook him hard and told him something was wrong. At first he was groggy, but the urgency in my voice must have gotten through because he sat up and asked what was going on. I told him to sink. Upstairs was blasting, and I thought someone was in the house. That woke him up real fast. We left Ian asleep on the couch and crept back up together. When we got to the bathroom door, Duncan didn't even hesitate. He pushed it open and stepped inside. They determined that the entry point was a downstairs window, which was wide open and had been previously unlocked. Duncan's family doesn't have cameras in their house, so there was no evidence we could turn over. The police said that it was likely that it had just been a burglar committing a random attack. But my friends, and I think it was way more specific than that. First of all, why would a burglar purposely make noise by turning on the sink faucet in the first place? Yeah, it was obviously a trap to lure someone upstairs. But what was the plan if he was trying to rob the place? This makes me think he had a more sinister intention, one I can't fully explain. Duncan is convinced that whoever broke in knew his parents were out of town and had expected only one person to be there that night. Him. If that's true, then I can only imagine that whoever had broken in intended on seriously injuring or killing Duncan. I don't even like to think about what would have happened had they gone in that upstairs bathroom by myself. This happened on a Friday night a couple months back. My girlfriend's parents had planned a weekend trip out of town, some kind of anniversary thing, I think. So naturally, my girlfriend Bonnie invited me to stay at her place. Normally, her parents are pretty strict, and sleeping over in her room is definitely off limits. But since they began the whole weekend, we figured it wouldn't hurt anyone. Bonnie lives in one of those suburban neighborhoods where every house looks the same. Quiet enough that by 10 o'clock, it always feels deserted. Honestly, that place creeps me out a little whenever I leave late at night. So I was relieved at the thought of just staying put for once. I showed up around 8, brought snacks, and we watched a movie. The usual stuff. Bonnie's room is on the second floor, facing the backyard. And from her window, you could just barely see into the dense line of trees that borders their property. They don't have much exterior lighting, so at night it's pitch black out there, like looking straight into a void. Bonnie has a queen-sized bed, so we both had plenty of space enough that we could stretch comfortably without crowding each other. I'll skip the rest of your irrelevant stuff. We eventually turned off the TV around midnight and drifted off. I don't remember falling asleep, but I vividly remember the unsettling dream that followed. Now, before I tell you about it, I want to say one thing. I've only had a false awakening dream a couple of times in my life before. This night was one of them. For anyone who's never had one, it's a really strange and almost transcendent experience. Dreams, like the one I'm about to describe, are actually the main reason. I believe there are things in this world beyond those that we can see in the dream, but I couldn't do anything about it. I was frozen and then silence. I was still fixated on the light below the door when the voices started. At first, it was just one voice, a woman's voice, saying all sorts of nasty things about me. Insults about my appearance, my outlook on life, my future. But then things started getting more personal. I just didn't know it. I sat up slowly, obviously still scared, but trying to reassure myself that the nightmare was over. But to my horror, when I looked at the bedroom door, I saw that same beam of light pouring into the room. And then I heard it. The downstairs door slamming shut again, followed by those same frantic footsteps stomping up the stairs. The entire sequence replayed itself with agonizing precision. The footsteps stopping at the door, the voices, the secrets, the whole thing. I couldn't help myself. Again, ran towards the door and through it, open only to experience that same cold darkness as before. When I finally woke up for real, my heart was racing. I was 75% sure I had actually woken up, but I was so disoriented from the strangeness of that double false awakening dream that I couldn't be sure. Bonnie was sound asleep next to me, completely unaware of what I had just been through. That's when I knew I was awake. For real. In my dream, I hadn't even thought to look over at the other side of the bed. I started to relax. But when I sat up to look at the bedroom door, I damn near screams. There, under the door, was that same strip of light that I had seen in my dreams. It was the exact same image. It didn't make sense. Bonnie and I were alone, and every single light in the house was supposed to be off. For a second, I just stared, unsure of what to make of what I was seeing. But then I heard footsteps downstairs. Clear as day. Someone was inside the house right away. I knew we were being robbed without another thought. She didn't scream or anything when I told her, which was a huge relief. It felt like forever. But after a few tense minutes, the police arrived at the house. Things got loud downstairs. The police actually kicked in the front door, and there was a bunch of shouting.